June 18, 1944, USS Intrepid Marianas Sea. Lieutenant Junior Grade Hideaki Tanaka of the Imperial Japanese Navy stood in the enlisted mess hall, his hands shaking as he held a tray loaded with more food than his entire squadron had shared in 3 days. Roasted turkey with gravy, scalloped potatoes, glistening with cream corn on the cob, fresh dinner rolls, cherry pie, and a glass of cold milk. The American sailor behind the serving line, irritated by the delay, gestured impatiently at the ice cream station. Chocolate or vanilla mac, make it quick. The question paralyzed Hideaki. Ice cream on a warship in combat operations in the middle of the Pacific, it defied every principle of naval logistics he understood. Japanese carriers rationed rice, American carriers offered frozen dessert choices. He had been pulled from the Marianas Sea 4 hours earlier, one of 37 Japanese airmen recovered during the massive air battle. He expected execution or at minimum starvation in the ship's brig. Instead, a medical corpsman had treated his burns, given him morphine, issued him clean dungarees, and now he stood in a cafeteria that smelled like a Tokyo restaurant before the war. The sailor's irritation grew. "Come on, buddy, you're holding up the line." Behind Hideaki, other rescued Japanese pilots shuffled forward, equally stunned. One whispered in Japanese, "This must be how they soften us for interrogation, make us grateful before the torture." But there were no interrogators, only American sailors eating the identical meal, laughing at some joke, completely ignoring their supposed enemies, standing 3 feet away. Hideaki pointed at the chocolate, lacking the English to speak. The sailor scooped a generous portion onto his tray with mechanical efficiency, already turning to the next man. As Hideaki moved toward the tables, he caught sight of Kenji Nakamura, a veteran pilot from his own carrier. Kenji's face had gone pale, his eyes darting around the mess hall like a trapped animal searching for the trick. This abundance was not possible, not on warships, not during total war, not for prisoners. Yet here, it was undeniable and overwhelming. The first bite of turkey dissolved on Hideaki's tongue, releasing flavors he had forgotten existed. Around him, captured pilots ate in stunned silence, some with tears streaming down their faces, others mechanically consuming food their bodies desperately needed, but their minds could not process. One young pilot vomited from eating too quickly after months of malnutrition. An American corpsman appeared immediately with water and gentle instructions to slow down. The ice cream melted into sweet liquid as Hideaki stared at it. And training instructors had taught that Americans were soft, dependent on luxury, weakened by decadence, that their ships would crumble under the disciplined spirit of Japanese warriors. But if the enemy considered frozen desserts standard rations during combat operations, what did that reveal about the war Japan was losing? After the meal, guards escorted Hideaki to the ship's medical bay for a full examination. He braced for rough treatment, hands instinctively protecting his ribs where he had cracked them during the water landing. Instead, he found himself in a facility that surpassed most Japanese shore hospitals. The lighting was bright, and even the floor gleamed with fresh polish. The air smelled of antiseptic rather than infection. An American doctor, Lieutenant Commander Michael Reynolds, gestured him toward an examination table, while a Japanese-speaking interpreter explained the procedure. "We need to check for internal injuries," the interpreter said. "The X-ray machine will take pictures of your bones." Hideaki's eyes widened. X-ray machines were rare even in Tokyo military hospitals. Here on a carrier in the middle of the ocean, the Americans had mobile imaging equipment. The examination revealed 2 cracked ribs and a hairline fracture in his left wrist. The doctor explained the treatment plan through the interpreter, then did something incomprehensible. He administered penicillin. Hideaki had heard rumors of this American miracle drug. Japanese military medicine had nothing equivalent. Infection killed more wounded Japanese soldiers than enemy fire, while Americans apparently had medicine that prevented bacterial death entirely, and they were giving it to enemy prisoners. The medical bay bustled with activity. American sailors with minor injuries waited alongside Japanese POWs, treated in order of medical priority rather than nationality. A young American with a badly burned hand sat next to Osamu, a Japanese radio man with shrapnel wounds. Neither acknowledged the other, but neither showed hostility. It was simply medical care distributed with bureaucratic efficiency. A Japanese medical officer captured the previous week assisted the American staff. Hideaki recognized him as Fumio Sato, formerly of the carrier Shokaku. Dr. Sato moved between patients, his face haunted. Later, during a brief moment, alone, Sato whispered to Hideaki, "They have entire storage rooms filled with penicillin cases of it. They use it like we use bandages. I watched them save 3 men yesterday who would have died within days on our ships, and they saved 2 of our pilots without hesitation." The revelation cut deeper than any wound. Japanese propaganda had promised that American industrial weakness would doom them, that their soft society could not sustain total war. But here was evidence of such overwhelming medical abundance that they could afford to heal their enemies. The following morning, 37 Japanese POWs boarded a transport train at Norfolk Naval Station. Hideaki expected boxcars or military cargo trucks. Instead, they rode in passenger coaches with upholstered seats and functioning windows. The train pulled away from the harbor, and through the glass, Hideaki witnessed a world that contradicted everything he had been told. The Norfolk shipyard stretched for miles, dozens of vessels in various stages of construction or repair. Cranes moved with mechanical precision, welding sparks showered from hull sections. The scale dwarfed anything in Japan, but it was the civilian activity that shocked him most. Thousands of workers streamed through the gates, men and women, white and black, arriving for shifts in personal automobiles. The parking lots held more cars than Hideaki had seen in his entire life. In Japan, only the highest-ranking officers owned vehicles. Here, ordinary factory workers drove to their jobs. The train passed through Virginia countryside, and the abundance continued. Farms with intact barns and healthy livestock, towns with undamaged buildings and busy streets, grocery stores with customers entering and leaving carrying paper bags. No bomb craters, no rubble, no signs of wartime deprivation. Noboru, a Zero pilot who had been with the WWII since Pearl Harbor, pressed his face against the window. "Where are the ruins?" he whispered in Japanese. "Where is the destruction? Your bombs fell on their fleet, not their homeland," Kenji answered, "but we were told their economy was collapsing, that the war was draining them." Hideaki watched an American family picnicking in a park, children playing while parents laughed. It was Sunday afternoon, and these civilians showed no sign of suffering or sacrifice. When the train stopped at a station in Richmond, prisoners watched American soldiers greeting families. Wives kissed husbands on leave, children waved small flags, a vendor sold ice cream cones to a line of customers. The normalcy was disturbing. This was not a nation straining under total war. This was a country conducting military operations as routine business, while civilian life continued uninterrupted. One young American soldier noticed the Japanese prisoners watching from the train windows. He did not glare with hatred or make threatening gestures. He simply raised his hand in a casual wave, then returned to his conversation with his girlfriend. The gesture contained more power than any propaganda. He literally did not see them as threats worthy of concern. The bus pulled through the gates of Camp Swift, Oklahoma, and Hideaki pressed against the window to see what awaited. He expected barbed wire, guard towers, harsh searchlights. All were present, but something felt wrong. The camp looked too orderly, too clean, almost comfortable. American guards directed the prisoners toward processing, their manner professional rather than hostile. One guard noticed Hideaki limping slightly and called over a medic without being asked. The attention felt disorienting. Inside the processing building, Red Cross volunteers distributed supplies. Each prisoner received toiletries, clean clothes, towels, and a packet containing writing paper and pencils. An older woman with kind eyes handed Hideaki his supplies and said something in English. The interpreter translated. "She says you are welcome to write home. Letters will be inspected, but will be sent." Writing home to tell his family he was alive, the concept seemed too generous. Then came the barracks. Hideaki had prepared himself for concrete floors, minimal bedding, crowded conditions. Instead, he found wooden buildings with real beds, mattresses, blankets, and pillows. Each bunk had a small shelf for personal items. The building had electric lights, heating, and indoor plumbing with hot showers. Kenji sat heavily on a bunk, bouncing slightly to test its softness. "This is better than our officers' quarters on Zuikaku. We had straw mats on steel floors." Osamu explored the bathroom facilities, his face reflecting astonishment. "Hot water, individual sinks, real toilets. We lived like animals on our ships, and the Americans housed prisoners like guests." That evening, guards escorted them to the mess hall. The building was spacious, well lit, with long tables and bench seating. The kitchen, visible through a serving window, gleamed with modern equipment. The meal was substantial: beef stew, thick with vegetables, mashed potatoes, fresh bread with butter salad, and cake for dessert. Coffee, milk, and water were available without restriction. The portions were generous, served by American cooks who treated the task as routine. Hideaki ate slowly, trying to process each new impossibility. Around him, other prisoners exhibited similar disbelief. Some ate mechanically, others wept quietly. A few refused food out of stubborn pride that crumbled within a day. Morning came with a bell rather than harsh shouting. Hideaki woke, slowly, momentarily confused by the comfort of his mattress. Around him, other prisoners stirred, adjusting to a routine that felt surreal. After breakfast, guards explained the daily schedule. Work assignments were voluntary educational programs, started at 9 recreation time, was in the afternoon, mail call, would be at 4 evening, was free time until lights out at 10. The structure was orderly but not oppressive, more like a military base than a prison. Captain Charles Morrison, the American officer overseeing prisoner affairs, spoke fluent Japanese. He gathered the prisoners in the recreation hall for orientation. "You are prisoners of war," he began, his tone firm but not harsh. "You will be treated according to international law. We expect respect for camp rules, but we also respect your dignity as military men who fought for your country. You are not criminals, you are defeated soldiers, and there is no shame in honorable defeat." The words, delivered in perfect Japanese, carried unexpected weight. Honor and defeat, the concept was foreign to Hideaki's training, which taught that capture meant eternal shame. Yet here was an enemy officer acknowledging their service with respect. The camp canteen opened at noon. Using scrip earned from voluntary work assignments, prisoners could purchase items unimaginable in Japanese military service. Chocolate bars, cigarettes, magazines, writing supplies, even musical instruments. Hideaki watched Noboru carefully count his scrip, then buy a harmonica. The young pilot's face glowed with childlike joy as he tested the instrument, producing tentative notes. "When did you last play music for pleasure?" Kenji asked him. Noboru thought for a moment. "Before the war began 4 years ago, we were told pleasure weakened discipline. The Americans seem to believe happiness strengthens morale." The recreation hall contained ping-pong tables, chess sets, cards, books in Japanese, and even a small library with technical manuals and newspapers. Current newspapers showing American war progress, but also demonstrating that the captors were not afraid to let prisoners see information. The educational programs stunned Hideaki most. American teachers offered classes in English, mathematics, mechanical engineering, agriculture, and even business practices. The camp's most visible symbol of American abundance stood in the recreation yard, an actual ice cream machine. Not a luxury reserved for officers or special occasions, but a standard piece of equipment that operated twice weekly, producing frozen desserts for hundreds of prisoners. Hideaki watched the machine's first operation with other prisoners pressed against the fence, unable to believe what they were seeing. An American sergeant operated it with casual efficiency, neither rushed nor ceremonial. He simply turned it on, added ingredients, and within an hour produced gallons of vanilla ice cream. Ice cream requires constant refrigeration. Fumio observed his medical training, making him understand the implications. That means this camp has electrical power to spare refrigeration capacity beyond food preservation and supply chains that could deliver dairy products fresh to the middle of Oklahoma. The abundance is not just what we see, it is the infrastructure making this possible that should terrify our high command. When prisoners received their first servings, some refused initially. Pride and suspicion warred with desire, but within minutes the sweet cold treat had broken through resistance. Men who had eaten nothing but rice and fish for years tasted cream and sugar and vanilla, and something inside them cracked open. Noboru ate his serving slowly, savoring each spoonful with closed eyes. My daughter never tasted ice cream. She was born during rationing. I am eating something my own child has never known, given to me by enemies who do not even consider it special. The mail system provided another psychological blow. Every week, bags of letters arrived from America, distributed to soldiers serving worldwide. Prisoners watched Americans receive packages from home containing cookies, photographs, books, and cigarettes. The volume was staggering, thousands of letters processed daily, delivered to men fighting halfway around the world, maintaining their connection to home. When the first letters from Japan arrived for the prisoners, carefully inspected but unaltered men wept openly. Hideaki's letter from his wife was 4 months old, written before his carrier sank, but holding it felt like touching home. She wrote of their son's progress in school, of small neighborhood events, of her hope for his safety. December arrived cold and gray over Oklahoma. Prisoners adapted to the rhythm of camp life, but an undercurrent of tension grew as guards prepared decorations and the camp buzzed with unusual activity. The Americans were planning something for their Christmas holiday. Hideaki had heard of Christmas from pre-war encounters with Western missionaries, but he had never seen it celebrated. The chapel received a large pine tree, which prisoners watched American soldiers decorate with lights, tinsel, and colored ornaments. The recreation hall was transformed with wreaths and red ribbons. The mess hall received similar treatment. The preparations confused many prisoners. Why waste resources and time on decorations during war? Captain Morrison addressed the confusion during an evening gathering. Christmas is important to Americans, he explained in Japanese. It celebrates peace, family, and hope. Even in war, we remember these things. We believe maintaining our humanity and our traditions makes us stronger, not weaker. This year, you will share our Christmas. You are far from your families, as many of us are. No one should be alone during this season. The implications troubled Hideaki. Celebrating a holiday with their captors felt like betrayal, like accepting defeat too fully, yet refusal seemed childish, especially after months of generous treatment. On Christmas Eve, guards distributed small packages to each prisoner. Opening his, Hideaki found a bar of soap, a package of writing paper, a pencil, a small bag of hard candies, and a handmade card. The card, drawn by an American child, showed a decorated tree with the words "Merry Christmas" written in careful letters, and below it, from the children of Oklahoma City, "We hope you can go home soon." His hands trembled holding the card. An enemy child had made this for him, wishing him well. The innocence of the gesture pierced his defenses more effectively than propaganda ever could. Christmas Day began with special religious services for those interested. Many prisoners attended out of curiosity, watching Americans sing hymns and pray with genuine feeling. The chaplain's message, translated carefully, spoke of peace on earth and goodwill to all people, even enemies. The morning after Christmas, Fumio requested a meeting with Captain Morrison. The Japanese medical officer had been observing the camp's medical operations for months, his professional training allowing him to understand implications others missed. His face showed the strain of accumulated revelation. The meeting took place in Morrison's office, conducted through an interpreter, though Fumio understood more English than he admitted. "Captain, I must ask you something that has troubled me since my arrival. Your medical supplies, your pharmaceutical inventory, your treatment protocols, they exceed what we had in our best military hospitals. I served on the carrier Shokaku. We had 52 aircraft and 2,000 men. Our entire medical department had less penicillin than your camp clinic receives in a weekly shipment. How is this possible?" Morrison leaned back, considering his answer. "Japan signed the Geneva Convention, but did not ratify it. So your military medical corps was not built around prisoner care or even comprehensive soldier care. Your doctrine emphasized endurance and sacrifice. Our doctrine emphasizes bringing everyone home alive. We built our medical system around that principle. The infrastructure required is enormous. Fumio's hands trembled slightly. I watched you treat a Japanese prisoner yesterday for an infected wound. You used penicillin without hesitation. That single dose would have saved 5 men on my ship. I had to choose who lived and who died based on scarcity. You choose everyone lives because scarcity does not exist. Morrison's expression softened. I cannot imagine making those choices. Our medical officers do not have to. That is not mercy on our part. That is industrial capacity. We can afford to heal everyone because we produce enough medicine to heal everyone. Fumio closed his eyes. Before the war, I believed Japanese medical training was superior. We studied the latest techniques learned from European texts, maintained high standards, but training means nothing without supplies. I was an excellent surgeon with nothing to work with. Your medics with less training save more lives because they have access to miracle drugs we could not imagine. By spring 1945, Camp Swift had held Japanese prisoners for nearly a year. The transformation was complete. Men who had arrived expecting torture and starvation had been fed abundantly, housed comfortably, treated with medical excellence, and given freedoms inconceivable in Japanese military service. The cumulative psychological impact had shattered their fundamental worldview. Hideaki sat with Kenji and Noboru in the recreation yard, watching a baseball game between prisoners and off-duty guards. The casual mixing would have been impossible months earlier. Now it felt almost normal. I received another letter from my wife, Noboru said quietly. She says the Americans are bombing with incendiaries, now whole neighborhoods burning, people living in ruins, but she tells me not to worry, that they are surviving. How can I not worry when I am eating 3 meals a day and sleeping in a heated building? Kenji stared at the baseball game without really seeing it. The disconnect is what breaks you. We are treated better as prisoners than our families as citizens. That is the message they want us to absorb, that we chose the wrong side, that our leaders failed us, that American abundance versus Japanese scarcity means the war's outcome was inevitable. A guard walked past, nodded politely, continued on. The guards no longer watched prisoners with suspicion. After months without escape attempts or violence, they had relaxed into mutual respect. Most prisoners had nowhere to go and no desire to flee back to a war they now understood was lost. Fumio joined them, carrying medical journals in English he had been slowly learning to read. The medical library keeps receiving new journals, he said. Recent research, cutting-edge techniques published during wartime and distributed to a prison camp in Oklahoma. They are not hiding their advances. They are confident enough to share them because they know we cannot catch up. Hideaki had been documenting his observations in letters home, carefully worded to pass inspection. He described the food, the facilities, the treatment, knowing his words sounded like impossible exaggerations, but he felt compelled to witness, to record the reality of American power for whoever might survive to read it. August 6, 1945, began like any summer day at Camp Swift. Prisoners worked, attended classes, ate meals, participated in recreation. The routine had become comfortable, almost normal. Then guards began gathering, speaking in urgent tones, and prisoners sensed something monumental had occurred. Captain Morrison called an assembly in the afternoon. His face showed both gravity and something else, a mix of relief and horror that prisoners could not immediately interpret. Gentlemen, he began, speaking slowly to allow interpretation. Today, American forces used a new weapon against the city of Hiroshima. A single bomb dropped from a single aircraft has destroyed most of the city. The weapon uses atomic energy power beyond anything previously employed in warfare. Casualties are estimated in the tens of thousands, possibly more. The room fell silent. Prisoners struggled to process the information. One bomb destroying an entire city, impossible, yet Morrison's face showed he believed it. Hideaki's mind raced. His sister lived in Hiroshima. His hands clenched as fear overwhelmed him. Morrison continued, I tell you this because you deserve to know. We do not hide information from you. This weapon changes warfare completely. I hope it changes your leadership's calculations about continuing this war. Surrender now, save what remains of your nation. That night, prisoners gathered in tight groups, speaking in fearful whispers. Many had family in major cities, now potential targets for these inconceivable weapons. The abundance that had surrounded them suddenly took on new meaning. If America could afford to treat prisoners so well, while simultaneously developing weapons that destroyed entire cities, what chance had Japan ever possessed? August 9th brought news of a second atomic bomb, this time destroying Nagasaki. The message was clear. America possessed multiple weapons of ultimate destruction and would use them until Japan surrendered. The industrial capacity that had made ice cream in prison camps had also harnessed atomic energy for military purposes. The gulf between the two nations was even wider than anyone had imagined. Spring 1946 found Hideaki back in Yokohama, living in a small apartment with his wife and son, both of whom had survived the war. His sister had perished in Hiroshima, a loss that would haunt him forever, but unlike many veterans, he had found purpose in his pain. He had become an unexpected ambassador of truth about American power. The occupation authorities sought former prisoners who had experienced American camps to help with reconstruction efforts. Hideaki's fluent testimony about Camp Swift made him valuable. He spoke at schools, community centers, and military facilities about what he had witnessed. His message was consistent and devastating to remaining nationalist sentiment. The Americans defeated us not through cruelty, but through abundance, he told audiences. I ate better as their prisoner than I ever ate serving the Imperial Navy. They gave me medicine that saved my life, education that improved my mind, and dignity that restored my humanity. This was not weakness on their part. It was strength. They were confident enough in their victory to be merciful. Other former Camp Swift prisoners spread similar messages. Fumio returned to medical practice and became an advocate for reforming Japanese medical systems based on American models he had observed. Supply chains must prioritize saving lives over tradition, he wrote in medical journals. We cannot afford to repeat the mistake of trained doctors without medicine. Industrial capacity must support human welfare. Kenji, the veteran pilot, worked with American occupation officials to establish educational programs teaching democratic principles. The contrast he had seen between Japanese authoritarianism and American freedom had convinced him that political reform was essential. Spirit alone cannot build a modern nation, he wrote. We need systems that empower individuals, not just demand sacrifice. The testimonies were not always welcome. Some Japanese viewed former prisoners as tainted by collaboration, too sympathetic to the conquerors, but the occupation authorities protected them, and gradually their message found receptive audiences. Young people, especially tired of militarism and seeking new direction, listened carefully to stories of American abundance and mercy. Decades after the war, Hideaki stood before university students in Tokyo, now in his 70s, still sharing his testimony. The students had grown up in prosperous Japan, knowing nothing of wartime deprivation. He needed to make them understand the gulf that had once existed. Imagine he told them that you have eaten nothing but rice and pickled vegetables for months. Imagine your ship has no fresh water for bathing. Imagine your friends dying from infections because medicine does not exist. Imagine being told that your enemies are weak, decadent, on the verge of collapse. Then imagine being captured and served a meal larger than anything you have eaten in years. Being offered a choice of ice cream flavors on a warship during combat operations. Being treated in a hospital better than any you have seen in your homeland. Being housed in comfortable barracks with heat and electricity. Being educated, respected, fed abundantly every day. He paused, letting the contrast sink in. That experience destroyed everything I believed about the war, not slowly, but immediately. One meal aboard the USS Intrepid taught me more about relative power than all my military training, because that meal was not special. It was ordinary American military rations. The abundance I found overwhelming was their normal. The students listened intently, some taking notes. One raised her hand. Tanaka, Sen, do you think Japan could have one if we had better understood American resources? Hideaki shook his head firmly. We could not have one regardless of understanding. The material disparity was too vast, but understanding might have prevented the war entirely. If our leaders had known that American carriers made ice cream during battle, that American prison camps had better medical facilities than our finest hospitals, that American civilians live better during wartime than our military during peace, perhaps they would have chosen diplomacy over war. Another student asked, what was the most important lesson from your experience? The most important lesson, Hideaki replied, is that true power includes the capacity for mercy. America defeated us militarily, but they won the peace by treating us with dignity.